For 5 years, I saved my family's wedding hall while they laughed at me. They called me lonely and useful. But they never knew I had every receipt ready for the night my mother tried to take all the credit. My name is Nora Whitlock, and I was 28 years old when I heard my family laughing at me through a microphone they forgot was recording. My brother Damon called me a lonely girl with receipts. My sister Brielle joked that I needed other people's problems to feel important. And my mother Celeste, standing inside Whitlock Hall, the wedding venue I had been secretly keeping alive for 5 years, said one quiet line that changed everything. Let her feel useful. It keeps her loyal. The audio file came to me by mistake from Aunt Lenora, with no message, no warning, just a rehearsal recording from the charity gala my mother was preparing to host that weekend. I pressed play, expecting speeches and microphone checks. Instead, I heard the truth. For 5 years, I had been covering venue loans, paying vendors, clearing payroll, fixing Damon's mistakes, funding Brielle's business needs, and protecting my father's name while everyone else performed the story of a strong family. I did not call anyone that night. I did not send an angry message. I opened my laptop, created a new file, and started doing the one thing they had always mocked me for being good at. I counted. By the time the charity gala began that Saturday, every person in that room would understand exactly who had been carrying Whitlock Hall and exactly what it was about to cost them. It was late on Tuesday when the file arrived. I was in my small office above the old pharmacy on Ridgemont Street, eating crackers from a sleeve because I had missed dinner again. My desk was covered with invoices, payroll notes, and a white coffee mug with a crack near the handle. Outside, rain made the streetlights blur against the window. I had planned to finish one client's quarterly reports, then drive home and sleep like a normal person. But Aunt Lenora's name lit up my phone. No text, just one audio file titled Gala Rehearsal Final. I thought she wanted me to check the sound for Saturday. Everyone sent things to me when they wanted them fixed, so I tapped play without thinking. The first seconds were harmless. A chair scraped. Someone tapped the microphone. My mother's voice came through, soft and practiced, saying, "Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Whitlock Hall." She sounded warm enough to fool a room, the way she always did. Then Damon laughed somewhere behind her and said, "Make sure you thank Nora's spreadsheet. That thing is the real owner around here." Brielle giggled and said, "Don't say that. She'll probably make us a receipt for the compliment." They laughed, and I almost let it pass because I had been trained to forgive the first small cut. Then Damon said, "She is basically a lonely girl with receipts. No husband, no kids, just invoices and other people's disasters." Brielle answered, "Honestly, she needs our problems. How else would she feel important?" Then my mother said, calm and low, "Let her feel useful. It keeps her loyal." I paused the recording. The office became so quiet I could hear the rain sliding down the glass. I waited for tears. They did not come. What came instead was colder and cleaner than grief. It was the feeling I get when a messy account finally shows the missing number. I knew every voice in that file. Damon, careless and loud. Brielle, sweet when she needed money and sharp when she felt protected. Celeste, my mother, gentle in public and exact when she wanted to hurt. I stared at the screen until it dimmed in my hand. Then I set the phone beside my laptop and opened a blank workbook. My fingers did not shake when I typed the title, Whitlock Hall, Real Accounts. You should know what Whitlock Hall was before you decide what I did with it. My father, Graham Whitlock, bought the old brick building on Laurel Road when I was 12. Back then, it was barely standing. The roof leaked near the bridal room, the garden was weeds, and the ballroom floor was scratched. But my father could stand in a broken place and describe the music he heard in it. He spent weekends sanding floors, fixing windows, painting walls, and planting white roses along the side path. He used to tell me, "Nora, one day people will start their happiest memories here." I believed him because he never made promises he did not work for. When he died, everything changed faster than grief could understand. A stroke took him on a Sunday morning before church. By Monday evening, our house was full of casseroles, flowers, and people telling my mother she was strong. Celeste accepted every hug like she was already standing under a light. At the funeral, she told everyone she would keep Whitlock Hall alive for Graham. People cried when she said it. I cried too. I did not know then that she had made a promise she expected me to pay for. Brielle was softer, which made her harder to refuse. She never said, "Pay for my life." She said the venue needed better images. She said brides expected elegance. She said her apartment closer to Whitlock Hall helped the family business. She said a new dress was part of client presentation. She said her daughter's dance lessons helped her network with mothers who might book weddings someday. Everything had a ribbon around it. Everything was almost reasonable if you were tired enough. So I paid, and Brielle smiled at public events in clothes my money had made possible, telling guests she had an eye for luxury. My mother was the cleanest of all. Celeste did not demand. She suggested guilt until it looked like duty. She would call late at night and say, "Your father would hate to see the hall struggle." Or she would sit across from me in the venue office, touch her forehead, and whisper, "I just cannot look at another bill today, sweetheart." If I hesitated, she became disappointed. Not angry, disappointed. Her disappointment could fill a room more completely than shouting. It made you want to pay just to breathe again. I tried to change things twice. The first time, I asked Damon for full access to the operating accounts if I was expected to keep covering shortages. He laughed and said, "Don't turn this into one of your little audits, Nora. It's a family business." Later that night, my mother called and told me I had embarrassed him. She said, "You have a way of making people feel small with numbers." So I apologized to him. That is the part I hate admitting. I apologized to the people living off the work they mocked. The second time, I suggested a monthly financial meeting. Nothing dramatic. Just income, expenses, upcoming bills, and a real plan. Brielle said it sounded cold. Damon said nobody wanted to live inside my spreadsheet. My mother smiled like I was a child holding a sharp object and said, "Families are not businesses, Nora." But 3 weeks later, when a vendor threatened legal action, everyone became very comfortable with my spreadsheet again. That was the pattern. They rejected my boundaries, then demanded my rescue. The audio file ended the last excuse I had been giving them. They were not confused. They were not secretly grateful. They knew exactly what I did, and they laughed at me for doing it. The next morning, they all behaved normally because people who use you rarely notice the moment you stop believing them. Damon texted, "Need you to clear the rental deposit issue today. Bride's father is being dramatic." Brielle sent pictures of gold centerpieces and wrote, "Can we use your card until reimbursements come in?" My mother left a voicemail reminding me to finish the donor screen because Saturday had to look perfect. I listened to her say perfect and understood that she still thought my silence belonged to her. I did not answer. I went to my office early, locked the door, and started building the record. Not a rant, not a diary, a ledger. I pulled bank statements, card statements, vendor emails, loan records, payroll transfers, and old messages. I made tabs for each category: venue loans, payroll coverage, Damon losses, Brielle expenses, Celeste obligations, personal credit exposure. I did not round up. I did not add paying interest, though there should be such a thing. I wrote only what was true: date, amount, reason, proof. Line by line, the past stopped being a blur and became evidence. Damon's tab filled quickly. Kitchen equipment ordered before permits, lighting deposits, refunds from booking mistakes, vendor penalties, repairs he called unavoidable. Brielle's tab was prettier and uglier at the same time. Branding shoots, salon appointments before client tours, decor samples that never returned to the venue, apartment help, boutique charges labeled client impression. My mother's tab took the longest because Celeste moved through money like perfume, everywhere and hard to catch. But records remember what people rename. Loan payments I made after she told the bank she had it handled. Insurance premiums, donor dinners, gala deposits, dress alterations hidden under event presentation. The brave widow became a column of charges. Near lunch, Aunt Lenora texted, "Did you hear the file?" I looked at the message until the screen went dark. I wanted to ask whether she had sent it by accident or guilt. I wanted to ask why she had warned my mother not to say those things into a microphone, but had not warned her not to say them at all. Instead, I typed one word: yes. 3 dots appeared, vanished, appeared again. Finally, she wrote, "I'm sorry." I placed the phone face down. Sorry is a small cup when the fire has already spread. By evening, I highlighted the totals. All of them. The spreadsheet did what my family had counted on me never doing. It added everything. The number appeared at the bottom of the screen, clean and quiet. I leaned back from it as if it had spoken. It was not just money. It was weekends. It was sleep. It was chances I did not take because some bill had to be paid first. It was 5 years of my 20s converted into payments for people who stood under lights I funded and called me lonely for keeping receipts. I cried for a few minutes. Then I wiped my face, saved the file, and made a copy. The charity gala was 3 days away. My mother had built the night around her own story without realizing she had built me a stage too. There would be donors, neighbors, vendors, relatives, old friends of my father, and half the town. There would be a microphone, printed programs, and a large donor screen near the entrance. Celeste would stand in a silver dress and tell everyone how she carried Whitlock Hall after Graham died. Damon would grin beside her. Brielle would take credit for the beauty of the room. And I was supposed to stand near the control table, making sure the screen worked, the payments cleared, and the family image stayed polished. The next morning, I called Marin Cole, a business attorney I trusted. I paid for an hour and showed her the documents. She listened without making the sad face people make when they want credit for sympathy. Then she said, "Nora, responsibility and liability are not the same thing. Your family has been treating your kindness like a contract." She walked me through what I could stop, what accounts needed formal notice, how to remove my card from vendor files, and how to freeze the personal credit line from future venue spending. Clean steps, legal steps, adult steps. I left her office with a calm I had not felt in years. Damon came to my office later that day without knocking. He stood in front of my desk, phone in hand, demanding to know why the rental deposit had not been cleared. I told him the issue came from his double booking and had to be handled through the venue account. He stared at me as if I had spoken another language, then smirked and said, "For someone with no real life, you are acting very busy lately." A week earlier, that would have hurt enough to make me useful again. That day, it only confirmed the record. I clicked my pen once and said, "You should leave now." He waited for me to soften. I did not. Friday night, I went to Whitlock Hall after everyone else had gone. The building looked beautiful in the dark. The brick glowed under the garden lights, and my father's white roses lined the path. Through the tall windows, I could see the ballroom waiting for Saturday, tables half-dressed, stage ready, donor screen dark. I unlocked the office and pulled what I needed: account forms, credit line papers, vendor lists, old checks, and renovation records. In one folder, I found a photo of my father standing in the unfinished garden, smiling with dirt on his jeans. That was when my throat tightened. Something he had built with hope had become a place where his daughter was quietly drained and then mocked for being empty. I sat at his old desk and whispered, "I tried, Dad." The room gave no answer, which felt fair. The dead should not have to keep managing the living. At home, I printed 4 copies of the support record and placed them in dark blue folders. One for my mother, one for Damon, one for Brielle, one for myself. I also prepared the donor screen file. It would begin normally with my father's photo, the charity name, and the sponsor list. I would not ruin the charity. I would not embarrass innocent people. But after my mother's speech, if she told the lie I knew she planned to tell, the final slide would change. Not to insults, not to the audio, just the real numbers, clean enough for a room full of witnesses to understand. Saturday arrived bright and cold. I dressed simply, put the folders in my bag, and placed the audio file on a small drive I hoped I would not need. Proof is like a match. You do not light it just because it is in your hand, but it changes how you walk into a room. When I reached Whitlock Hall, cars lined Laurel Road. Inside, the banquet room smelled of flowers, coffee, and expensive confidence. My mother stood near the entrance in a silver dress, glowing as people praised her strength. Damon moved through the crowd with a drink in his hand. Brielle adjusted the donor screen and told a vendor, "We wanted tonight to feel generous." I looked at her and thought how easy that word must feel when someone else has paid for it. Aunt Lenora saw me and went pale. She came close enough to whisper, "They don't know I sent it." I looked at her nervous hands and said, "Of course they don't. Not knowing things is what this family does best." She lowered her eyes, and for once I did not rescue her from the discomfort. Then Sienna, my 19-year-old cousin, came toward me with a stack of programs. She was the only person in the family who ever thanked me without being reminded. She looked at my face and asked softly, "Are you okay?" That question nearly undid me because it was simple and rare. I told her, "I am, but tonight may get uncomfortable." She glanced at the stage, then back at me and said, "Then I'll stay close." Sometimes one honest person in a room is enough to keep you standing. The program in my hand was beautiful. Cream paper, gold letters, my father's photo on the front, and inside, my mother's welcome note. Celeste Whitlock, guardian of Whitlock Hall, continues the work her beloved husband began. Guardian. I read the word twice, then slid the program into my bag beside the folders. The lights dimmed. Guests quieted. My mother stepped onto the stage and touched the microphone like she had been born for that moment. "Good evening," she began. "Tonight is about charity, family, legacy, and the strength it takes to keep a dream alive." Applause filled the room. Damon lifted his glass. Brielle dabbed at one eye. Sienna stood beside me. My laptop waited on the control table, the final slide ready but hidden. Then my mother smiled at the crowd and said, "After Graham passed, there were many nights when I sat alone in this building, wondering how I would carry it. But I did carry it. I carried this hall, this family, and this legacy because that is what a Whitlock woman does." The applause started again. I looked at the screen. I looked at the folders in my bag. I looked at the woman on stage who still believed my silence belonged to her. Then I touched the trackpad and stopped protecting the lie. Then I touched the trackpad and stopped protecting the lie. The donor screen changed behind my mother. At first, nobody understood what they were seeing. The slide was simple, almost too simple for a room dressed in flowers and soft lights. At the top, in plain black letters, it said, Whitlock Hall Support Record. Under that were 5 years of dates, divided into clean categories: venue loan payments, payroll coverage, vendor emergencies, Damon-related losses, Brielle-related expenses, Celeste obligations, personal credit exposure. And at the bottom, one line that made the whole room go quiet: personally paid or covered by Nora Whitlock. The applause died slowly. First, the back tables went silent, then the middle of the room, then the front, where my mother's closest friends sat with folded hands and careful smiles. My mother was still smiling for a second, still holding her hand over her heart, still standing inside the story where she had carried everything alone. Then she turned and saw the screen behind her. Her smile froze. Damon lowered his glass. Brielle stopped pretending to wipe a tear and stared at the slide like it had opened a hole under her chair. I stood beside the control table with my laptop open and my hand resting on my bag where the 4 blue folders were waiting. I did not feel dramatic. I did not feel powerful. I felt steady. That was all. There is a special kind of calm that comes when you finally stop helping people lie about you. My mother turned back to the room quickly. There seems to be a technical mistake, she said, forcing a small laugh. Nora handles the screen. Sometimes she gets a little too detailed. A few people looked toward me. That would have been my place to fix it. In the old life, I would have smiled, changed the slide, apologized for the awkwardness, and spent the rest of the night protecting her image. Instead, I picked up the first folder and walked toward the stage. When I reached her, I did not take the microphone from her hand. I simply stood beside her and held out the folder. "There is no technical mistake," I said. My voice was quiet, but the microphone caught enough of it. "This is the financial record of Whitlock Hall for the last 5 years, the part that did not make it into the program." The room went still. My mother's eyes flashed, but her smile stayed. That was Celeste Whitlock. Even when the truth was burning behind her, she still knew where the audience was. "Nora," she said through her teeth, "not now." Not, "Is this true?" Not, "What happened?" Not, "I am sorry." Just not now. Because in my family, the wrong thing was never taking from me. The wrong thing was making it visible. I looked at her and said, "Now is exactly when." Damon came toward the stage before I could say more. His face was red, and his voice was already too loud. "Turn it off," he said. "You are embarrassing yourself." I picked up the second folder and held it out to him. "This one is yours," I said. "Lighting deposits, refund losses, kitchen equipment cancellation, vendor penalties, and every time I covered something you called a timing issue." He did not take it at first, so I placed it on the edge of the stage. 5 years, I said. To the dollar. Damon opened the folder like he was going to prove me wrong by looking angry enough, but the first page stopped him. His mouth moved, but no real words came out. Brielle stood next, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. "This is disgusting," she said, but her voice shook. "At a charity event? Really, Nora? You could have talked to us privately." I almost smiled then. Privately was where they had laughed. Privately was where they had asked. Privately was where they had made sure no one saw who was paying for what. I walked down from the stage and placed her folder on the table in front of her. "I tried privately," I said. You called it cold. Damon called it a spreadsheet. Mom called it not how families work. Brielle looked down at the folder. She knew what was inside before she opened it. Apartment help, boutique charges, branding photos, salon appointments before client tours, decor samples that never returned to the venue, the pretty little expenses that always became business needs when my card was the one being used. My mother's voice cracked across the room. How dare you do this under your father's roof? That was the first line that almost reached the old part of me. My father's roof, my father's name, my father's dream. She had used those words for 5 years like a key to lock my mouth. I turned back to her. Dad's roof? I said. The roof that needed emergency repairs 3 years ago? The roof I opened a personal credit line to fix because you told the bank you had everything handled? I pointed gently to the screen. That roof is on the record, too. Someone near the front whispered, "Oh my God!" The words moved through the room like a small wind. My mother heard it. Her face changed then, not with shame. Shame looks inward. Panic looks for exits. She stepped closer to me and lowered her voice, but the microphone still caught part of it. "You ungrateful girl," she said, "after everything this family gave you." That sentence landed harder than she expected. Maybe because the screen was still glowing behind her. Maybe because every person in that room could see the numbers. Maybe because everything this family gave you sounded strange beside a list of everything I had paid. I opened my own folder and looked at the first page. "Everything this family gave me is not in here," I said, "because this is a financial record, and I could not find that column." There was no laughter, not one sound. Damon gripped his folder tighter. "You offered to help," he said. "Nobody forced you." I looked at him. "You are right. I offered to help, and now I am choosing to stop." He shook his head like that answer was unfair. "You think you are better than us?" I said, "No. I think I am done being useful to people who confuse use with love." Brielle had opened her folder by then. Her face went pale as she moved from one page to the next. "Some of this was for the venue," she said weakly. "Some of it," I answered. "That is why I listed it. The problem is not that you spent money for the venue. The problem is that you spent mine and called it vision." My mother tried to take control again. She turned to the guests and lifted both hands. "This is a family misunderstanding," she said, bringing back the public voice. "Nora works very hard. She gets overwhelmed. We love her. We can talk about this privately." It was almost beautiful how fast she built a bridge back to silence. But I had spent too many years walking across bridges that only led back to the same cage. "No," I said. "We are not calling it a misunderstanding anymore. The record is accurate. The documents are attached. I spoke with an attorney. Every voluntary payment ends Monday. My card is coming off the vendor accounts. The personal credit line is frozen from future venue spending. Any bill connected to this hall will be handled by the people who claim to run it." The room inhaled all at once. Damon said, "You cannot do that." "I can," I said. "And I am." Brielle's voice rose. "So you want the venue to fail?" That was the line I knew would come. They needed me to become the villain quickly before the truth settled too deeply in the room. I looked toward my father's photo on the screen, still visible in the corner of the slide. "No," I said. "I wanted it to survive. That is why I gave it 5 years. But survival cannot mean one person disappears so everyone else can keep pretending." My mother's eyes filled with tears then. The room had seen those tears before. I had seen them more than anyone. Sometimes they were real. That was what made them dangerous. My mother could truly feel hurt and still use that hurt like a weapon. She pressed one hand to her chest and whispered, "Your father would be ashamed of you." For 1 second, the old training rose in me. That line had kept me paying for years. Your father would be ashamed. Your father trusted us. Your father's dream. I thought of him standing in the unfinished garden with dirt on his jeans, smiling because he believed honest work could build something beautiful, and then the answer came to me, simple and clear. "No," I said. "Dad would have checked the books." The sentence landed softly, but it landed everywhere. Near the back of the room, Mr. Callahan, an old friend of my father's, lowered his head and said, "Yes, he would have." He did not say it loudly, but the room heard him anyway. My mother looked at him like he had betrayed her. Maybe truth feels like betrayal to people who survive on performance. Then Sienna moved. She had been standing near the control table, holding a stack of programs against her chest. She crossed the room and stood beside me. She did not say anything. She did not need to. In a room full of people who had watched me carry weight for years, one 19-year-old girl stood beside me and made me feel less alone than my whole family ever had. Aunt Lenora stood next. I had not expected that. Her hands were trembling against the back of her chair. My mother turned toward her with a warning look, but Aunt Lenora spoke anyway. "The audio file was real," she said. Her voice was thin, but clear. "I sent it to Nora. I should have spoken up before. I did not. That was wrong." The room shifted again. My mother snapped, "Lenora, sit down." Aunt Lenora did not sit. "I heard them," she said, looking at me now. "They were laughing at you during rehearsal. Damon said cruel things." Brielle laughed. "Celeste said it kept you loyal." Her voice broke on the last word, but she got it out. Now the words were no longer just in my phone. They were in the room. Loyal. The word my mother had used like a leash. Damon cursed under his breath. Brielle covered her face. My mother stood very still, holding my folder like it had become too heavy for her hands. I had not planned to play the audio file. I did not need to now. For a few seconds, nobody moved. A caterer near the wall set down a tray carefully, like even the staff had become afraid to make noise. One donor closed the program and placed it on the table. The minister, who had known my father, looked at the screen and then at me with something like sorrow. My mother tried one last time. "Nora," she said, and now her voice was smaller. "You are angry. I understand that. But you are punishing everyone because your feelings were hurt." I looked at her for a long moment. "My feelings were hurt when I heard you laugh at me," I said. "This is not about my feelings. This is about the money, the debt, the accounts, and the years you let me carry while you took credit for the carrying." I placed her folder in her hands. "This one is yours. It includes the loan payments, insurance, gala expenses, donor dinners, and every bill I covered because you said you could not look at another number. Page 3 has the notices from Marin Cole. On Monday, you will need to call the bank and the vendors yourself." My mother's fingers tightened around the folder. "You cannot just walk away from your family." "I am not walking away from my family," I said. "I am walking away from the job you made me do for free." That sentence changed the air. Brielle started crying then, not the soft, pretty kind she used in public, but the panicked kind. "What am I supposed to do?" she asked. It was the first honest question she had asked all night, and for a second, my old instinct almost answered it with help. That was the hardest part. Even after everything, some part of me still wanted to catch people before they hit the floor. But catching them had become the trap. "You will do what I did," I said. "Look at the numbers and make decisions." Damon laughed bitterly. "Easy for you. You have money." "I have money," I said, "because I stopped pretending bills vanish when I ignore them." The room was quiet enough for that line to stay in the air. Then I turned toward the guests. I had not planned a speech. I had planned a record. But the room needed one clean explanation before I left it. "I am sorry this happened during a charity event," I said. "The charity will still receive the donation already collected tonight. I made sure of that before I came. This is not about the charity, the vendors, or the guests. This is about a family business that has been presented one way while being funded another. I will not be answering questions tonight. The documents are clear." No one clapped. I did not want them to. Mr. Callahan nodded once. The minister quietly said, "Your father believed books should balance." It was not a grand sentence, but it was kind, and I held on to it. I looked at my mother one last time. She still looked beautiful in her silver dress. That was the strange thing about lies. They do not always make people ugly on the outside. Sometimes they stand perfectly dressed under soft lights and wait for the truth to ruin the room. "The payments stop Monday," I said. "The folders explain everything." Then I closed my laptop. No one stopped me when I walked toward the door. That almost made me laugh. For 5 years, they had stopped me with guilt, disappointment, my father's name, late-night calls, and emergencies. But in front of witnesses, they had nothing clean enough to say. Sienna walked with me into the lobby. "Are you leaving?" she asked. I said yes. She wiped her cheek with the back of her hand and asked, "Can I call you later?" I looked at her, young and shaken, but still standing. "You can call me anytime," I said, "but not about their bills." She gave a small laugh through tears. "Not about their bills," she promised. Outside, the cold air hit my face, clean and sharp. Whitlock Hall glowed behind me, beautiful and exposed. I stood in the parking lot for a moment, looking at the white roses my father had planted. I used to think love meant keeping every rose alive, even if the thorns cut you open. That night, I understood something better. Sometimes love means refusing to water a garden that everyone else only visits for shade. I drove home without turning on the radio. My phone started buzzing before I reached the main road. Damon called first, then Brielle, then my mother. Messages followed. Damon wrote, "You better fix this before vendors start calling." Brielle wrote, "My daughter will suffer because of you." My mother wrote only one line, "Your father would not recognize you." I read that one twice after I parked outside my apartment. Then I typed back, "Maybe not. I finally look like myself." After that, I turned my phone off. The fallout came faster than I expected, but exactly in the shape I expected. By Monday morning, the bank had called my mother. By Monday afternoon, 2 vendors had called Damon directly and discovered how little he understood about contracts he had signed. By Tuesday, Brielle learned that the venue card no longer worked for anything she called presentation. By Wednesday, my mother had to sit across from a loan officer and explain why the guardian of Whitlock Hall did not know the payment schedule. She called me after that meeting. I answered because a small part of me wanted to know whether anything honest had survived under the performance. "Nora," she said, tired but still proud, "you made me look like a liar." I looked around my quiet office, at my clean desk and the coffee I had actually remembered to drink while it was hot. "No," I said. "I stopped making you look like the truth." She was silent for a long time. Then she said, "You enjoyed it." I could have defended myself. I could have explained that relief is not the same thing as cruelty. but I had spent too many years translating my heart for people determined to misunderstand it. So I said, "This is not something I am discussing with you," and ended the call. Damon lasted 10 days before selling the venue van. It turned out he could make hard decisions when no one else was paying to delay them. He told people I had sabotaged operations, but vendors had seen enough of the folders to be careful around that story. Brielle struggled longer. Without my card, her pretty reasons had to face real money. She moved out of the apartment she said was essential to the business and into a smaller place near the school. For a while, she posted quotes online about betrayal and family loyalty. Then she took a part-time job with a florist who did not care about her vision unless it came with punctual hands. My mother tried to save the image longer than everyone else. She told people I had misunderstood private joking. Then Aunt Lenora corrected that in 2 living rooms and 1 church hallway. She told people I was unstable. Then Mr. Callahan told people my father always checked the books before he made promises. She told people I had abandoned Whitlock Hall. Then the bank notices became harder to hide, and abandon started sounding a lot like no longer paying. The venue did not close. That surprised some people. It did not surprise me. Whitlock Hall had never needed a miracle. It needed adults. My mother cut expenses. Damon learned calendars. Brielle learned that not every beautiful idea deserved a purchase order. The business became smaller, less polished, and more honest. Maybe my father would have liked that. Maybe not. I stopped asking the dead to referee the living. As for me, life became quiet in a way that felt strange at first. The first Friday after the gala, I came home and did nothing. No vendor calls, no emergency transfers, no texts asking if my card had room. I made soup and ate it while it was still hot. I waited for guilt to arrive. It did, of course. Guilt is loyal even when love is not. It sat beside me and asked who I thought I was to be peaceful while others struggled. So I answered it with facts. Adults had bills. Adults had choices. Adults had warning. I had given 5 years. The account was closed. I took on 2 new clients the next month. Real clients. People who signed contracts, paid invoices, and said thank you without making it sound like an accident. I moved into a better office downstairs from a bakery with 1 wide window and enough room to breathe. I bought a chair that did not hurt my back. It sounds small unless you have spent years making yourself small enough to fit under everyone else's needs. Aunt Lenora sent me a letter 6 weeks later. She wrote that sending the audio had been half accident, half courage, and that she was sorry courage had arrived so late. I read it twice. I did not forgive her out loud. I did not punish her either. Some people do one right thing after years of wrong silence, and you can be grateful for the right thing without handing them the keys back. Sienna stayed in my life. That is the part I like best. She came over the Sunday after the gala, and we made pasta in my small kitchen. She told me she had changed one of her college classes to accounting because, in her words, I want to understand what people hide behind pretty words. I laughed for the first time in days. I told her accounting was not revenge. She said, maybe not, but it looks useful. Then she froze, afraid she had chosen the wrong word. I smiled and said, useful is not the problem. Being used is. 3 months after the gala, I drove past Whitlock Hall for the first time without stopping. There was a wedding in the garden. White chairs stood in neat rows. A bride laughed near my father's roses, her veil lifting in the wind. For a second, the old pull came back. I wanted to check the florist, the rain plan, the invoice, the staff schedule. Then I kept driving. The building did not collapse because I passed it. The roses did not die because I stopped bleeding on their roots. That night, my mother sent one final message. "I hope you are proud of what you did." I looked at it for a long time. Then I wrote back, "I am proud that I stopped." After that, I blocked her for a while. Not forever, maybe not even for long. Just long enough to remember that peace needs protection too. People ask in careful ways whether I regret the gala. They say, "Could you have done it privately?" Or, "Did everyone really need to know?" I understand the question. It is uncomfortable when private exploitation becomes public record. But private was where they took. Private was where they laughed. Private was where I disappeared. The screen did not create the truth. It only stopped the room from looking away. I did not destroy my family. I destroyed the version of my family that required me to stay invisible. There is a difference. A family that survives only while one person quietly pays, fixes, absorbs, and apologizes is not being held together. It is being subsidized. My name is Nora Whitlock. I was 28 when I learned that loyalty without respect is just a prettier word for captivity. I spent 5 years keeping a dream alive for people who mocked me for knowing the cost. Then one night, under the lights of my father's wedding hall, I showed them the bill. Not because I hated them, because I had finally stopped hating myself enough to keep paying it. If you are the one in your family who always handles it, the one with the passwords, the receipts, the emergency transfers, the calm voice, and the tired eyes, listen to me. You are allowed to stop. You are allowed to count. You are allowed to let grown people meet the weight of their own choices. Love should not require you to become a hidden bank with a heartbeat. That was my story. 5 years of silence, 1 audio file, 4 blue folders, and a donor screen that finally told the truth. And for the first time in my life, when the room went quiet, I did not rush to fill it. And this is where Nora's story finally ends. But honestly, this is also the point where the real conversation begins. Because what happened here was not just about money. It was not just about a wedding hall, a donor screen, or 4 blue folders. This story was about that one person in every family who keeps fixing everything quietly, and then one day realizes that nobody is calling it love anymore. They are calling it duty. They are calling it habit. And sometimes, if we are being honest, they are calling it free service. So now let's slow down and talk about this story properly, because Nora did not scream. She did not throw plates. She did not make a dramatic villain's speech like a movie character standing in the rain. No, Nora did something much more dangerous. She opened a spreadsheet. And trust me, when a quiet woman opens a spreadsheet after 5 years of disrespect, even the bravest people should start checking their bank balance. But jokes aside, this story hurts because it feels real. Maybe not exactly the same situation, maybe not a wedding venue, maybe not a charity gala, but that feeling of being useful until people forget you are human, that is something many people understand. Nora was not a weak woman. That is very important to understand. Sometimes people think, why did she keep paying for 5 years? Why didn't she stop earlier? But life is not always that simple. When family is involved, emotions become complicated. Nora was not just paying bills. She was protecting her father's dream. She was protecting employees, vendors, weddings, and the name Whitlock Hall. She was not only looking at numbers, she was looking at memories. And that is where people like Celeste become dangerous. Celeste understood Nora's love for her father. She understood Nora's sense of duty. She understood that if she used words like legacy, family, and your father's dream, Nora would keep coming back to the table. Some people do not control you with shouting. They control you with guilt wrapped in soft language. Celeste did not say, "Give me money." She said, "Your father trusted us." And that sounds emotional, but underneath it, it means, pay the bill. That is emotional manipulation in its cleanest form. It looks respectable from outside. It sounds like family values. But inside, one person is slowly disappearing. Damon was a different kind of problem. Damon was loud entitlement. Every family story like this has one Damon. He makes mistakes, calls them timing issues, then expects someone else to clean the floor. He signs contracts, creates losses, spends money, and then acts offended when anyone asks basic questions. Damon's biggest talent was turning responsibility into someone else's emergency. And honestly, if there was an Olympic sport for avoiding accountability, Damon would not train properly. But he would still ask Nora to pay for the uniform. His line about Nora being a lonely girl with receipts was cruel, but also very revealing. He was not just insulting her. He was trying to reduce her entire life to the one thing he used from her: receipts, numbers, records. He wanted her skills when they saved him, but he mocked those same skills when they made him uncomfortable. That is how entitled people behave. They love your help, but they hate your proof. Then we have Brielle. Brielle is softer, prettier, more emotional, but not innocent. She is the kind of person who never says, "I want to use you." She says, "It is for the business. It is for the image. It is for the family. It is just temporary." And suddenly your money is paying for someone else's lifestyle with a ribbon tied around it. Brielle's selfishness is not loud like Damon's, but it is still selfishness. Actually, sometimes soft selfishness is harder to fight because it does not look like attack. It looks like need. This is why Nora's story is so powerful. She was surrounded by people who each had a different way of taking from her. Damon took with noise. Brielle took with softness. Celeste took with guilt. And Nora gave with silence. Now let's talk about that audio file, because that audio file was the turning point. Before that, Nora still had one lie left. She could still tell herself, maybe they are grateful inside. Maybe they just do not know how much I do. Maybe they love me, but they are bad at showing it. Many good people survive on these kinds of excuses. They keep giving because they believe gratitude is hidden somewhere under the bad behavior. But the recording removed that excuse. Nora heard them laugh. She heard Damon insult her. She heard Brielle joke about her. And worst of all, she heard her mother say, "Let her feel useful. It keeps her loyal." That line is cold. Very cold. That is not a mistake. That is not stress. That is a strategy. And notice something important. Nora did not explode after hearing it. She did not call Damon and fight. She did not text Brielle a long emotional paragraph. She did not go to her mother and beg, "How could you?" She simply opened her laptop. That is why this revenge works. It is not emotional revenge. It is documented revenge. There is a big difference. Emotional revenge says, "I want you to hurt because I hurt." Documented revenge says, "I want the truth to stand where your lie was standing." Nora chose the second one. She did not create false drama. She did not exaggerate. She did not add fake numbers. She just counted what had already happened. And honestly, that is terrifying for people who live on confusion. Because confusion protects users. Clear records expose them. That is why the spreadsheet matters so much. In this story, the spreadsheet is not just a file. It is Nora's voice. For 5 years, Nora had swallowed words. She had swallowed anger, disappointment, tiredness, and humiliation. But the numbers did not swallow anything. The numbers remembered every transfer, every vendor payment, every emergency, every temporary help that became permanent. When Nora finally added it all up, the truth became impossible to ignore. And that is a huge lesson. Sometimes we do not even know how much something is costing us until we count it. Not just money, time, sleep, peace, self-respect. Sometimes people are not only taking your money, they are taking your weekends, your future, your confidence, and your ability to breathe without guilt. Now the charity gala scene, that was the heart of the revenge. And it was brilliant because Nora did not choose a random moment. She chose the exact room where the lie was going to be celebrated. Celeste planned to stand on stage and tell everyone she carried Whitlock Hall. She planned to use public respect as a crown. But Nora did not attack the crown. She simply showed the receipt for it. And that donor screen was perfect. Not because it was cruel, but because it was clear. There were no insults on the screen. No, my family betrayed me. No dramatic red letters. No emotional crying video. Just a support record. Categories, dates, totals, personally paid or covered by Nora Whitlock. That is why the room went silent. People can argue with emotions. They can dismiss tears. They can call anger drama. But clean proof? That is harder to push away. Celeste tried, of course. First, she called it a technical mistake. That was her first instinct. Control the room, control the story, make Nora look too detailed, too sensitive, too awkward. This is very realistic. Manipulative people often do not deny the truth first. They try to manage how other people see it. Celeste knew the screen was dangerous because it took the private truth and made it public. Then she said, "Not now." That line is so important because it shows that Celeste was not shocked by the content. She was angry about the timing. She was not thinking, "My daughter suffered." She was thinking, "My image is being damaged." And when someone cares more about the exposure than the harm, that tells you everything. Damon reacted exactly like Damon. Loud, angry, defensive. He told Nora she was embarrassing herself, but actually, he was the one being exposed. That is why he got loud. Some people use volume like a blanket. They think if they shout loud enough, everyone will forget what is on the screen. But Nora did not shout back. She gave him his folder. That was beautiful. She did not argue with Damon's personality. She handed him his record. Brielle's reaction was also perfect. She said, "You could have talked to us privately." But Nora had tried privately, and that is a real-life lesson too. Many people only ask for privacy after public truth threatens them. They do not want privacy to fix the issue. They want privacy to control the damage. There is a difference. The most emotional moment for me was when Celeste used Nora's father against her. "Your father would be ashamed of you." That line was cruel because Celeste knew exactly where Nora was soft. She knew Nora loved her father. She knew Whitlock Hall was not just a building. It was memory. It was grief. It was identity. So she tried to use that love like a chain. But Nora's answer was perfect. Dad would have checked the books. That line is simple, but it destroys the manipulation. Because Nora takes her father's memory back from Celeste. Celeste used Graham as emotional blackmail. Nora brings him back as a man of truth and responsibility. And when Mr. Callahan says, "Yes, he would have," the room finally understands that Celeste does not own Graham's memory. Truth does. Sienna's role is small, but very important. She is the proof that not everyone in the family is rotten. She does not save Nora. Nora saves herself. But Sienna stands beside her. And sometimes that is enough. Sometimes one honest person standing beside you can undo years of feeling alone. Sienna asks the question nobody else asked, "Are you okay?" That one line shows the difference between love and use. People who use you ask, "Can you pay this?" People who love you ask, "Are you okay?" Aunt Lenora is also interesting. She is not a hero from the beginning. She stayed silent for years. She laughed late. She looked down. She avoided becoming the next target, but finally she speaks. Her courage is late, but it still matters. This is realistic too. Not everyone who does wrong is a villain. Some people are cowards, and cowardice can still hurt deeply. Aunt Lenora's apology does not erase the past, but her truth helps break the room's silence. Now, the ending is very satisfying because Nora does not burn everything down. Whitlock Hall does not close. The family does not become homeless. No one gets destroyed in a cartoon way. Instead, everyone finally meets reality. Damon sells the venue van. Brielle gets a job. Celeste talks to the bank. The venue becomes smaller, less polished, and more honest. That is real consequence. Not revenge fantasy, but balance. And Nora's life becomes quiet. That is the real victory. Not applause, not public praise, not everyone saying sorry. The real victory is soup while it is still hot. A clean desk. Real clients. A chair that does not hurt her back. A phone that is not buzzing with emergencies. Peace can look very small from outside, but for someone like Nora, it is everything. I love the line where she says guilt arrived like a loyal dog. That is so true. Even when you do the right thing, guilt can still come. Setting boundaries does not always feel good immediately. Sometimes it feels wrong because you are used to being used. Your nervous system thinks peace is danger because chaos was normal for so long. Nora did not become free because she never felt guilt. She became free because she checked the facts instead of obeying the guilt. That is a big life lesson. Feelings are real, but they are not always instructions. Guilt can knock on the door. You do not have to give it the keys. And the final message of this story is not, never help your family. That would be too simple and too harsh. Family help can be beautiful when there is respect, honesty, and balance. The message is, do not let help become your identity. Do not let love become unpaid labor. Do not let people turn your kindness into a contract you never signed. Because Nora was not wrong for helping. She was wrong only when she kept helping people who mocked her for it. And even then, we should not judge her too harshly. Many good people learn this late. They think if they give enough, people will finally value them. But users do not become grateful because the amount gets bigger. Sometimes they become more entitled. That is why Nora had to stop. The donor screen did not destroy the family. It destroyed the lie. The folders did not create the debt. They revealed it. The spreadsheet did not make Celeste a liar. It stopped making her look truthful. And Nora did not become cruel. She became clear. So what can we learn from this story? First, if you are always the one solving everyone's problem, pause and ask, are they grateful or are they trained? Because there is a difference. Grateful people respect your limits. Trained people panic when you stop performing your role. Second, keep records. Not because you plan revenge, but because memory becomes weak when emotions are involved. Records protect you from being gaslit. When someone says, you never helped, the record says, actually, here are the dates. Third, boundaries do not need long speeches. Nora's strongest lines were simple. I am not covering it. The payments stop Monday. I am walking away from the job you made me do for free. Clear words are powerful because they leave very little space for manipulation. Fourth, Never confuse being needed with being loved. This is probably the biggest lesson. Being needed can feel warm at first. It makes you feel important. But if people only come close when they need something, that is not love. That is access. And finally, peace is worth protecting. After Nora left, her life did not become perfect, but it became hers. That matters. Your time, your money, your energy, your sleep, your dignity. These are not small things. These are your life. And anyone who asks you to sacrifice all of that while laughing behind your back does not deserve unlimited access to you. So yes, Nora's revenge was quiet. But it was powerful because it was clean. She did not attack them with lies. She defended herself with truth. She did not scream to be heard. She made the record speak. And by the end, when the room went quiet, Nora did not rush to save anyone from that silence. That silence was not empty. That silence was justice.